Good evening, everybody. Hope your Wednesday's gone very, very well. This is the EFL Debate League One podcast, and I'm delighted to be joined by my wonderful co-host, Ed Walker, who knows everything there is to know about League One.
But not
And
how to
we're
talk
also
into a
joined...
microphone. Sorry about that. Just giving it a little whack there.
Absolutely. We're also joined by Matt Farley from the wonderful Stevenage Football Club Podcast. Good evening, Matt. We'll start with you because I know you've got a dash for work in a little while. But I do want to ask you about that victory at Burton Albion on Saturday. What a result that was.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to talk about it, Ed. I feel bad.
You just started under routine, mate. It's what you do.
Yeah,
you've done
but
this
look,
season.
no, that's it. Look, but big win for us. Real weird game, wasn't it? Just so much happened with the early penalty and then having to come behind and get a grip on it and get ahead in the game. But yeah, look, a huge 3 points for us. Just incredible to see us, third place with 39 points is quite unbelievable after 21 games. I think a lot of people would agree. But no, the game looked big win for us again. We conceded that early penalty. So I think what was really nice about Saturday, and we said it coming out the ground, it's another game that we've had to win in different circumstances. So, really impressed with the team, actually. I think the first half after the penalty, it took us a good 20 minutes to fully kind of get into the game. Once we got in the game, we looked good. We got the goal, which I think was really important before half-time. We said we had to get that equaliser before half-time. And, yeah, I was very impressed with the second half. I thought it was a solid performance.
I would have to say, if anything, I think you'd be a little disappointed with just two, Matt, by the sounds of how dominant they were. Basically, for the moment Burton went ahead, that was it for their chances.
Yeah, no, it did feel like that. And it just felt, you kind of sat there and you felt the goal coming. It was just when it was going to come. And then obviously the penalties happened and big goal Reedy again has buried it. But yeah, no, it was. I felt that we could have scored more and possibly won by more, but it's all about the win and all about the points. No, I was really impressed with the team because, I've seen it happen before. You go 1-0 down in a game like that from a penalty, it can just ruin your game when it's early on like that. And I was really impressed with the way that we responded, really impressed with some of the changes Steve made in the game. He had to get ahead. A blooming good day and a good afternoon for us and a massive win. Yeah.
Absolutely. Matt, I want to talk to you about the left-sided combination play between Dan Butler and Nick Freeman, because having watched the highlights of that game, that was a feature of your game that really caught my eye.
Yeah, do you know what? To be fair, there's been many good connections either side of the pitch, actually, because as we know, Steve likes to rotate. He even did it for that unbelievable cup tie last night. I just want to throw that in there. My God, I still haven't recovered. Nick and Dan, they're building. I think what Steve's doing with this side is he builds partnerships, Steve, throughout the sides, with the back, with the strikers up top, and Dan Butler with Nick, and whoever's playing on that left side, if it's JFC or if it's Harvey White that's come into a bit more game time over the last couple of games, who's been excellent, by the way. He's building those relationships with the side. And I think as well is, Steve likes to have different formations of play. 1 week we'll play with the 5 and 2 wing backs, and then 1 week he'll play with a diamond, which we played with the Burton. So I think building those relationships are very important in our squad because there's a couple of different ways that we can play. But yeah, look, Dan's been brilliant this season. We knew what we were going to get from Dan. He's top level League One left back, played Championship. So yeah, he's been brilliant, and the relationship that he's got with Nick and the other midfield players is shining through at the minute, Gab. Shining through.
Certainly is, and another player that's shining through at the moment, Matt, is Big Goal Reedy.
Stop it! It's shining through, Gab.
We need to change his name because it's basically every game goal Reedy.
Every goal Reedy. When he doesn't score now, we go, oh, he hasn't scored today. So I got to that point now where
critical of it.
It's like the Harry Kane situation. He's got 3 games without a goal.
Matt, is there any kind of theory of? It feels really weird to say this idea that we're actually looking at Jamie Reid heading into January and thinking, is someone going to poach him from higher up? It's quite bizarre to think, really.
It is, and we were having this chat last night about it, the FA Cup tie. That's crazy because when we got Reedy, we just, we didn't know where he was going in his career. It was like, at that time he looked like a bottom League 2 striker. A lot of people said he might have been National League at that point. So, it's kind of like, where's he going? And you're right, he's currently second top goal scorer in League One. And I think with League One as well, you get a lot of those championship clubs looking at those top goal scorers in League One. Not necessarily League Two all the time, but League One, I feel that if you're, a top goal scorer in League One, you do get those championship sides. So it's a discussion we've had, and I think we're all in the same mindset. Look, if it did come down to it, we'd be gutted to lose him because he's earned us 10 points. And actually, when you look at the grand scheme of that to our position, I think we'd be 10th if it wasn't for Jamie Reid's contributions this season. But if he does go, he's contracted for 2 years, so hopefully we'd get a lovely pay packet for him.
Also in January, clubs are willing to spend that bit more in January because they know how tight the market is, and clubs don't want to let their players go for without a good reward. So I do think you could do a lot with that money, and bearing in mind that he is on the older side of the spectrum. I remember him coming through at Exeter, and that was sort of about 8 years ago now. So I think he's on sort of late 20s-ish.
Does it almost kind of feel like you've got to take this chance with him to get this profit on him? Because it almost feels like 12 months down the line, he might not have anywhere near this kind of level again.
It's
almost kind of worth just going for it when the right price comes. Do it. Yeah, when the right price comes, do it.
And I think the thing is as well, chaps, is we're in a position now where if someone did come in for Reedy and we sold him, it's not like 2 years ago where players didn't really want to come and play for us. We're kind of in a position where I actually think with a bit of money, say we sold him well, actually players would look and go, oh, I'm going to play for Stevenage in League One, etc. So I think we'd be in a good bracket to go and actually recruit a good striker that could come in and, I'm not saying replicate, but come in and do a similar job to Reedy. I think we're in that position at the minute.
Yeah, and also you got to factor in there's having Steve Evans as manager is a massive draw, and Leon Hunter I think is one of the best directors of football in the EFL. The job that he's done very sort of quietly behind the scenes, and I think so I'd have every confidence in the club recruiting smartly. And the other thing is, it's not like you're short of strikers as well. Like I think if Reedy went, you'd feel like maybe an Aaron Prez could step up. You've got Listy, could he go?
Kane Hemmings.
Yeah, Kane Hemmings, of course. Yeah, although I did think he ballooned one chance at Burton in the first half. But,
he'll balloon a chance and then put away another. Though that's kind of what Kane's game is, really.
I tell you what, I've been so impressed with Kane. I mean, when we signed Kane, it was a little bit like, can he do it at League One? He's been in League Two for a good few years, but under Steve, I know Steve's got some good credentials out of him in the past, but can he do it? The guy's jumped up and done brilliantly. It took him a month to really get going. He scored 3-4 goals. Now he scored again last night. And do you know what? It's not just some of the goals he's been scoring. It's actually his play. I mean, we were watching him last night in the cup tie. He came on in the game, changed the game. And it was his hold-up play was bringing others into play. We were watching him going, Jesus Christ, how have we signed Kane Hemmings in League One and he's playing like this for us? So, yeah, I think there would be other players to hopefully step up if Reedy went. Obviously, I think Steve's kind of first point of call would get in a goal scorer that could somewhat replicate what Reedy's been doing. But there are certainly players there. Jordan Roberts is another. There's certain players there that can certainly try and step up if Reedy did move on. But
what a season Jordan Roberts is having, by the way.
Just what a player. I mean, when we first got Jordan a year ago, we could straight away tell that he would be good enough for League One. And he's one of those players that I've been really excited in watching play in League One because I've had big expectations. I said it to you last year, Gad, didn't I?
You did.
And wow, I mean, the guy, he looks like a League One player. He looks like a top League One player. It's just, but that's under Steve. Jordan's played under Steve before. He's had good time under Steve before. So it's Steve Evans. He seems to bring the best out of certain players and player improvement. I think you can look with Reedy on that as well. So yeah, look, what a season Jordan Roberts is having. Massive influential player, and he's vital to the way that we play. I mean, without Jordan Roberts, he's the cogs to how we want to work and how we want to play. So vital player.
Absolutely. That midfield depth, Matt, looks like a real area of strength because Steve's spoken about. I was sort of To be honest, I was half expecting the story of Harrison Neal to be, he hasn't quite cut the mustard. Not that Steve Evans would say that publicly, but a little bit. Well, he's not quite at the level we're hoping. Actually, if you listen to Steve Evans talk, it's like he's trained really well recently, and he was happy to put him in the starting 11. I think in one of the recent games, you've mentioned Harvey White there, who I think was really highly rated at Tottenham, and then you've got your experienced players like your Jake Forster-Caskys, your Jordan Robertses, your Ben Thompsons, your Finley Burns. Like, there's so many options in there, and it just must be a lovely position to be in to have that sort of depth.
I completely agree. I've said to you, Steve uses the phrase "no stocking fillers." He wants, every player that we have in this current League One team that we've got is a starting player. Steve wants that problem, and Steve spoke to us about this on the podcast. When Steve looks at signing a player, when he signs them, he doesn't think about where they're going to be on the bench. He thinks, where could they fit in this starting 11? So Steve, when he signs players, and he has done for us, he's done this season again, he signs players with the intention of them starting.
Yeah.
So what we have is we have a group of players that all expect to start, all expect to play. And when they come off the bench, not only do they make an impact because they're a starting player, but they're good enough to compete. So, yeah, look, it's incredible the way that Steve has kind of built this culture and this group that, all of them are starting players. When they come on, look at last night, for example. Kane Hemmings, Harvey White, Nathan Thompson all came on. They all ended up scoring. So it's that quality of coming on, the expectancy to come on because they're used to starting for other sides and starting in the division. So Harrison's another example of that. Quality, tenacious player. He'll get better as he gets older as well. I think that's the thing. There's still a lot of improvement to be had with Harrison. But just kind of explains our team in a nutshell. Every player expects to start and play. When they do start, they're expected to do well, even if you're Harrison Neal. So, yeah, great setup that Steve's built here. And hopefully we can just keep up there, fellas. Fingers crossed. It would be incredible. Fingers crossed.
Matt, I know you've got to shoot off, but I just want to ask you just one final question, if I can. It feels like you're 20 games in. I don't think you can say that it's not a start anymore. It's mid-December now. You're absolutely up there on merit. I imagine that you're feeling, as much as you're sort of just enjoying this wonderful crest of a wave, this ride, I also feel like you must be feeling more confident about Stevenage's chances of being the shock story of League One by the week, I'd have thought.
You know me, Gab. I believed it before Northampton in the opener, man. They've just needed to do it on the pitch, do you know what I mean? But look, it's incredible. It's certainly the happiest I've ever been supporting Stevenage Football Club. It's my favourite season, this one. I just love it every week. When we come up to the division, it's just amazing to be in a league with so many big sides and some great players in the division and great managers. And for me, it's just enjoying watching Stevenage play in the league. To be up the top of it is unbelievable. But I fully believe. I mean, look, I've said it on here before. We've done pretty much half the season. We've got 39 points. That can't be taken away. We've got
almost
that in
safe
the bag.
now.
Yeah, that's it then. We're 11 from 50. I mean, beat Exeter Saturday, we're on 42. And you're looking and you're thinking,
every time you talk, Matt, you say the next fixture, and I just listen to it. I think, they're going to say they're going to win that one as well. You seem to have winnable fixture every single time I come and meet you. You've mentioned the next game. I just think, well, this is going to carry on. Where's the hard game? Where are they, Matt? Have you had the hard games yet or not? Where are they?
This is it, my man. And the thing is I think everyone is expecting to go, when's that inevitable fall going to happen where they fall out and but they linger in mid-table, which is an unbelievable season, which it would be. But why can't they stay there? I mean, they've got a team that's got the current best away form. The defence is brilliant at the minute. With big goal Reedy scoring every other week. Why can't they stay there with the manager they've got? And don't get me wrong. Look, there's some big clubs and teams are going to get better. The one thing, we've played a game in hand or two more than teams, so there is that as well. But why can't they start there? I mean, I worked out, we said on our pod earlier, teams that we've played from 9th and below, we've only lost once. So why can't we stay up there?
As well.
Yeah, we've got 39 points. We could have a kind of not as good of a second half to the season and still be up there somewhere. So I fully believe in this group. Their identity is the key. It's very effective in this division, considering some of the football. They've got a group, as I said earlier, that all expect to start and play and win. And they've got a manager that knows how to win football matches in this division and get promoted. So I'm a believer, and I'm sticking by my team. I love them to absolute pieces, and I might be coming across as even more positive than you chaps are probably used to. But I'm sticking by my boys. I think they're going to finish in the top 6. I'm owning it.
And then I saw her face. No,
nose is going like that.
Brilliant. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. It's been lovely to have you on the podcast. And all the best. All the best, mate.
No, chaps, thanks for having me on. Sorry I can only stay for the short time. But
no worries. It's been great.
No, thanks for having me on, chaps. Take care.
Cheers.
Just wondering, Gab, when we rename ourselves the Stevenage Show. Because I just feel like we have a Stevenage section every week now. Matt's smile just gets bigger and bigger. I don't know what he's going to do. This stays the same in May.
Ed,
honestly.
I won't hold it against you at all if you're not quite able to match Matt's energy level.
Let's hope I can get there. Let's see what happens down the line. A couple of weeks from now.
Oh gosh. So Burton Albion, obviously, after that 2-1 defeat to Stevenage, which we discussed, have dismissed Dino Maamria as manager. I suppose obviously we've got to give Dino his credit for what he did. The Great Escape season in 2021, another sort of semi-Great Escape last season from a really difficult position in September. He's done some fantastic work at the football club, and I think Burton Albion are in a better place for Dino Maamria. I guess the next question is, who next and what next?
Well, there's a number of options. The main priority for me is going away from, I think, what Burton have had with his last 2 managers in Hasselbank and then Maamria, which is this kind of firefighter persona, the ones who come in with the objective quite clear midway through the season. They absolutely smash that objective, but then they just can't take it forward to the next level. I think that's ultimately what's been the killer for Dino this year, with the objective less clear at the start of the campaign, natural expectations raised within the fan base, not wanting a repeat of last year. He went away from the team of the second half of last season, which was essentially just battlers. They just battled for every single point, played the percentages, not really fussed about style of play. Tried to implement a bit more of a controlling element, trying to be a bit more possession-based. What it's created is an incredibly hesitant team that rarely attacks and gets caught out at the back and produces numerous weak performances as a result. So it was sadly always going to be the case this end this way. We need a manager who, at the minimum for me, can just get a better amount out of this group of players, because I think you and I are in agreement, Gab. We would have said this at the start of the season. We like that Burton team. I think we looked at this squad with the idea of top of the bottom half. Maybe if everything clicks in this kind of open league, they could do even better. They're miles off that at the minute, and there's got to be a reason for that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I do think that Maamria has did a little bit more than firefighting last season. That's just my personal perspective, because I do think he made the team a little bit hard to predict. And, some of the creativity tactically he came up with, I think, deserves some credit. But I do take your point that the next step was always going to be a difficult one, and unfortunately, that's proven the case. I guess in terms of there's 2 parts of this, isn't there? You've mentioned going away from the firefighting aspect, but we talked on BBC Radio Derby about Burton Albion needing a bit more of an operational figure behind the scenes, because it feels like the manager is responsible for picking the team, training, and in-game management. Could probably do with a bit of help in recruitment, you'd imagine.
It's kind of when you take a step back and actually realise quite a lot of staff have actually left this club in the last few years. Really, you go back to when Nigel Clough left in the COVID season. That was probably the last really, really top manager with the top infrastructure behind him that allowed the club to achieve the levels it had of pursuing the top in the League One, and a little bit before that competing in the Championship before. So it's not just a case of bringing in a manager who will be able to sort this out. There's a lot more that needs to be added. Some areas behind the scenes, certainly. I think there's some group of fans at the minute who kind of want this idea of completely changing the coaching staff, perhaps this idea that maybe it's the same coaching staff that retained from the previous regime with Dino and Hasselbank. It might still be a bit of a similar feeling around the place. So there's a wonder if maybe this new manager, whoever it is, we could speculate on that. There'll be a lot of names on the short list, but might there be a change to his backroom team as well that could prove better for the club down the line?
Certainly. In terms of options, we mentioned last night Danny Cowley and Dean Holden are a couple of others. Any others sort of caught your eye?
I haven't seen Holden much in the mix. I think he's probably one who's always going to get floated around, isn't he? These League One level jobs on the back of what he's done previously. It's very Burton to go with someone with a previous connection. Ben
Yeah.
Robinson has his list of contacts. He has his former employees. So I think the names currently up towards the top end of the shortlist are Gary Rowett, who would be back for a second spell. It's very Burton to get a manager in for a second spell again after Hasselbank having
Yes,
2 spells
although I
Clough
think
having 2 spells.
Rowett's stock is probably a bit higher than
I would have
Burton's.
thought so as well, but it's nice to dream. Let's put it. Let's have it that way. I think that's probably the dream area. I would always point out to people who do look at these odds on betting websites, they do fluctuate very quickly.
Of course,
These
yeah.
things can get influenced quite a lot. It literally takes a couple of bets on a high amount, and suddenly someone shoots up the rankings. One of the people also up there is Steve Cotterill. Now that feels a pretty sensible one to me. Again, there is a Burton connection. I believe he played for the club back in the 80s. I think it was.
Well, it's more to me. I feel like he's when I look at Steve Cotterill, funny enough, I've actually seen Shrewsbury win at the Pirelli a couple of times, and I felt like he's a commander general on the sidelines. And in one way, I respect that because I think in difficult situations he can provide that leadership, and he can certainly whip a team into shape. Do I necessarily see him taking Burton Albion further than Maamria has done, which presumably is
It's
the
an interesting
intention,
question, really. How do you find the one who takes that next level? The other thing with me with Cotterill, which I'm a little bit hesitant on, in my opinion, I feel like he's quite prickly. He can be
Oh,
if
God,
things
yeah.
are rough. I would feel like a bad spell under him would not be a nice time to be around the club.
Yeah,
Would be my feeling with that. So I kind of recall that with Shrewsbury, and ultimately, I think he did a fine job with Shrewsbury. I think it had to be
yeah,
said,
of course.
delivered them some of the highest finishes for a long time. So it certainly would be one to consider. The Cowleys you mentioned would be an interesting point. It's a bit curious that they've been out of work for as long as they have, and the idea of the
I
project
wouldn't be
that's
too worried
potentially
about Eddie Howe was out of work for a year, though,
yeah,
Ed.
yeah.
So,
I'm always just a bit curious. It's a little bit like maybe it's a good thing that managers actually give themselves a break, but you always kind of feel like, do they
yeah.
want to go back in as quick as they can? Like I was surprised Artell took as long as he did to come back in after leaving Crewe, for instance.
But I think again, I think in Artell's case, I think that sort of refreshed and reinvigorated him. So I think for a certain period, maybe there probably is a certain period where managers apply for jobs and don't get them. But I also think for maybe half of that year, it's literally just a case of spending a bit of time with family and maybe not have. Although you're keeping your eye in the scene, you're not necessarily that wanting to be sort of that engulfed by the job in the way that you are as a man. I think a sporting director before the appointment could be a good chat, actually. Someone who can
I can't remember if Burton have ever operated under a director.
No, I wouldn't have thought
I
so.
don't think they have. No,
I think modernise a bit. I think that's the way forward for Burton Albion. If you want to break the sort of the 16th barrier, as I would call it.
There is kind of a feeling in my mind that they are still a little bit still reading from that 2010s high, thinking they can still operate that same way, thinking that's the secret to
the game's changed a bit. I think
it does require a bit of evolution, but the manager situation is very intriguing. It's going to be a little while yet. I'm pleased there is going to be a process in trying to refine this. I do hope it comes sooner rather than later because the fixture schedule does get quite intense. There are some tough games coming up. We've got an interim backroom staff taking this weekend's game against Oxford. Charlton away the following week. You'd ideally like to see someone in there for that weekend. You just have to see. There might be a chance they go to Oxford, who I don't think have made the strongest of starts under Des Buckingham. It probably have to be said. They feel like they've regressed a little bit from the real high they were on under Manning, for instance. Maybe they go into that and have a really competitive, kind of, to quote the cliche, shackles off performance and put a really good display in. Alternatively, I'm reminded of when Oxford last played Burton in transition between managers and absolutely swamped them 5-1. So,
yeah,
I'll have to see with that.
Certainly. Who are the key players you think the next Burton Albion manager can really build around? Because Mark Helm's form in the second half of last season was fantastic, wasn't it? There must be a player in there.
Helm's, I think, been one of the disappointments of the year. Actually, we both looked at him. I remember we did the deep dives during individual clubs, and we were both so looking forward to Helm on the back of what he'd done in the second half of that season. He's just not found the ball dropping his way, I think, as much anymore. Sometimes he's been brought off midway through games, whether that's been a tactical reason or a forced off through an injury, for instance, or a little knock, and it really takes the shine out of the midfield, I think, when you lose Helm in there, because you suddenly have to put someone like Raheem Harper in, who really slows the game down, and your best, most technical passer is Joe Powell, who's barely getting to the opposition half because he's now at the base of midfield.
Yeah.
So you lose that advanced ball carrying, advanced ball playing position out of him, and I would want someone to certainly unlock the talents of him. Joe Powell's the other one to mention, the guy at the base of midfield, key part of the set piece routine that's always been in this team. Sam Hughes at the back, who's just a colossus. They're coming out of this academy system out of Leicester City, you can see it in his DNA. I think an underrated skill of his, for instance, is getting the ball down around halfway, just carrying it into midfield. When he gets the opportunity to do that, you really do notice it. Quadra, got to be said, I'm basically on my knees praying there's no January recall here, because he is just too good for this team. It really is simple to say that. Certainly a team, the position Burton are in, someone of that ability really should not be in there. There were a couple of times, I think, towards the end of Maamria's spell where it did really feel like they were just giving the ball to him and hope he could do something. And that's not really the way you want to operate, but
Sure.
It's the talent he does have, and he does have that ability. Teams have to triple up on him sometimes. I remember Portsmouth were tripling up on him at times to try and deal with him because he had Jack Sparks on toast most of that game, even though he didn't ultimately get a goal. And I suppose the other one to be keen on is Cole Stockton, who was... yes, had an injury impact quite a lot the first half of this season, but at the same time, to also be in the middle of December and not yet have a league goal to your name, something's not quite right there at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. Our next section is actually a pre-recorded section with Lee Rooney from the Brunton Bugle. We're talking about all things Carlisle United. So I'm delighted to be joined by Lee Rooney from the Brunton Bugle. Lee, a bit of a mixed time, I suppose, for Carlisle United, because on the one hand, from the sort of mid and long-term perspective, it's really exciting that the club's got this new takeover from the Piatek family, and there's going to be hopefully a really big January budget for Paul Simpson. But between now and then, there's a small matter of 4 games, 2 of which being relegation 6-pointers, and a team that's actually just been thumped a couple of times.
Yeah, it's a weird one. We're a little bit down to the bare bones at the moment. Essentially, the 18 we're selecting is the 18 that is available. Essentially, there's no one sitting in the stands waiting to come in. Start the season, we look like we maybe built a bit of depth into the squad. Maybe not necessarily the quality, but a bit of depth at least there. And at the moment, it's just not there. Missing too many key players in key positions. And it's just started to catch up with us, and the confidence is starting to be dented. But prior to these last 2 games, where no one's really battered us in any way, and it just kind of felt like this was maybe a couple of games too far for what we got available. I mean, last season, you remember the first half of the season, we had a similar problem, but
yes,
the quality starting 11 was there. That was still starting. We're missing key players, not starting 11 now. I look through the injured players. I mean, Finn back would probably would have carrying on starting at right back. Obviously, we brought Josh Emmanuel in, who's pretty good. Paul Huntington's experience at the back has been really missed these last couple of games, definitely. Callum Guy's job of screening in front of the defence in the midfield, that has been a massive, massive loss for us, I think, this last month or so, because he was helping keep us in games occasionally, where we were against teams that were pretty good. He did such a good job of doing that, role of across the back 4 or the back 5 as it was sometimes, and we don't really have anyone else who can do that. Dylan McGeoch isn't a similar sort of player really in that sense.
He's not playing much football, I don't think, McGeoch, actually.
Yeah, last month or so he's finally got fit, and he's still sort of finding his feet a little bit and coming into a team that's struggling, but it doesn't help.
Yeah, I mean, last few years sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and then up front, to lose JJ Coyote after 1 game to a shoulder injury, just rotten luck. And he probably would have been starting pretty much every game for us in the recent run. And we've had to basically play Joe Garner for the full 90 in most of these games. And he's 34, 35. That's not really what you'd be hoping from him. You want him
coming off the bench, Joe Garner, for the last 5-10 minutes to use experience.
And starting the occasional game as well. And there's a few players who just haven't quite, I don't know what it is, just haven't quite stepped up, and Simmer doesn't seem to quite fancy them. Ryan Edmondson's a weird one. A lot of the fans were expecting big things of this season. And
I know Ross was really big on Ryan Edmondson going into the season and thought he could really step up. Yeah,
it's a weird one. Something happened in pre-season. We're not entirely sure what. He obviously missed that first game. The suggestion was it was for disciplinary reasons. We don't know the details of that, right. But he hasn't really. I don't think he started a league game actually this season. I might be wrong on that one, but it kind of shows you when you look at some of the players who've been ahead of him as well. Up to it, if I'm being brutally honest. You like if your Luke plans, you just hasn't been good enough, frankly. It's been tough. But like I said, most games we've been quite tight, and in it, it's this last few weeks where I think it's just caught up on the team, and the confidence is starting to get dented a little bit. And we could really do the next few weeks. We've got the likes of Huntington, Charters, and Coyote all coming back. Jack Ellis as well, finally returned to fitness. He's had a bit of bad luck as well of injuries this season. Getting 3 or 4 players like that back in should really help us, and getting through to January and getting some players in is going to make a massive difference, I think.
I do the words getting through to January feels like quite a well used one around Carlisle, Lee, and I can understand that. I can, because the injuries that you've talked about, and certainly the capacity to strengthen. I'm kind of a little bit surprised that Paul Simpson has gone so far down that sort of line, because I feel like it's a little bit of a risk, and it feels to me, with every passing interview that I've seen Paul Simpson do, it feels like he's showing less and less confidence in the players he already has, and I do kind of get that because of the performances that have been put in. At the same time, I also feel like, is there a bit of management that you've got to do, in terms of showing a bit of faith in players, and because these are the players that you're going to need for these crucial games.
There's only so long you can do that for. That's the problem, Gav. I think he's tried to do that for a while, and I think he's a realist and knows that the simple fact is we haven't got the depth and quality. And the fact that we are down to the 18 probably helps him with this. He can say, look, at the end of the day, this is the 18 I can pick at the moment. There's no one beyond that. And at the end of the day, they're just not quite up to it. And I think most fans understand that and accept that. And yeah, there was a bit of a bad reaction at Blackpool at the weekend towards some of the players, and I don't think it was so much towards Simo. I think he took it that way, but I think it was because he came over with the players at the same time. I do get what you mean, and there is there's a thin line. You've got to make sure you don't cross there, but at the same time, you can't lie forever about how good the squad is. And the simple fact is, it is lacking that extra. At the end of the day, we started the season with probably a bottom 4 budget, so where we are right now probably fits in with where we should be realistically. Simo performed miracles last season with a bottom 6 budget, but you can only keep doing that for so long, and when you keep getting little injuries and niggly problems, it eventually will catch up with you. So we do need to get that quality in, and some of the there's some names being bandied about already, and they really would add a bit of quality to the squad, but the hope is we can get at least 2 or 3 of them in for that Exeter game on the 6th of January, ready to go and be raring. Because the problem is with past seasons, we've often taken 3 or 4 weeks to get the players in, and it's too late that. And I think they know that, and because we've got that extra budget, we can actually go for some of the players who we've gone for in the past who would have knocked us back and go, well, we've got the money now, and that investing in training grounds and things like that. Are you interested in it? It sounds like a few of them are already said, yeah, let's do it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, things will be better come January.
That'd be great if you could get some conversations in over the next few weeks, so that the wheels are in motion by the first week of January, because that would be so huge. Because but I think for the next 5 games, it's obviously a difficult assignment. Where are the areas that you're going to be needing to strengthen, do you think, Lee?
Right through the spine of the team, if I'm honest. You've probably seen this season we've switched from being a 3-5-2 to a 4-3-3. There's a little bit of necessity in there, and obviously Paul Huntington's injury has meant it's been a bit more difficult, and certain midfielders not being available at key times as well has caused us a few problems there. So I think if we're going to do that, we probably need to get at least a couple of wingers in, because at the moment we're relying on Jordan Gibson doing that alone, and Luke Plant just played out there. And like I said, I don't want to be put too much of a down on a player, but I think most fans would be quite happy if he goes back in January, because he's just not been good enough.
But you recruited for a 3-5-2, I think I'm right in saying, Lee. So
yeah, he did, but there's always that feeling of like, well, you might need to switch at some point. We did that quite successfully last season, switched to it because Amari Patrick played as more of a central striker who could drift out wide. The irony is, if we keep saying this on our pod, if he'd stayed, Amari Patrick probably wouldn't even play in most weeks for us at the moment. But I mean, that was a personal choice as much as anything, I think, moving back to down south to Sutton. Sure. I think we definitely need at least a couple of wingers in. We probably need at least 1 or 2 strikers in as well. Maybe a central midfielder to replace Guy if he's going to be out till September, October next year. maybe one centre back in as well, just for a bit of extra players in there.
Bit of
And
experience, possibly.
Yeah, and to be honest, a goalkeeper to give Hurley a bit of competition, because obviously it looks, I mean, Jokel Anderson's one of those ones where we were all quite, he looks a good signing. He's done really well in his previous loan spells. Excuse me. And he's been dreadful. He's just been awful. Like, he's made 6 or 7 really big errors in games, and he's out injured until, I think, end of January or something like that, with a shoulder injury, or maybe even longer. And I think the feeling is he'll probably end up going back to Reading in January just to free up that space so we can get someone else in. And yeah, there's been a few of them that they've just really not quite lived up to the expectations of what we hoped for. And definitely, I think you'd imagine there'd be a few going out as well in January, possibly as well.
Let's take the scenario that Carlisle were to lose their next 4 games and the teams above them kind of draw. That would put Carlisle adrift of safety. Going into January. So there's part of me that's a little bit concerned that they'll give themselves a lot to do now. Not to say that the gap wouldn't be unbridgeable, but it does feel like I'm a little bit concerned that the attitude that Carlisle seem to have towards these next 4 games and the current personnel, is there that danger that the gap's going to get bigger between now and January?
There's always that danger, isn't there? But I don't think it's a case of, let's just get through and hope for the best sort of. I think that we do want to get wins from these games, and we're going to have a huge following down at Fleetwood and an even bigger one down at Wigan for those games over Christmas. And we've shown with generally when we have those big followings, take away Saturday, which was it wasn't an enjoyable day out at all. I mean, with the greatest respect, Blackpool in December is not a nice place to go. If I'm honest, it was howling wind. The conditions were awful. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if we lose some of these games, those teams are the ones around us a lot of the ones we're playing in the upcoming games. So they're kind of teams that are going to potentially pull away from you anyway. So I think Simmer was very calculated in what he did after the game at Blackpool and what he said in terms of what he said about the fans and stuff like that. He took a bit of the heat off the players as a result. He basically took the heat off them because all the focus was on what he said. And I think as well, you're guaranteed you're going to have a hostile, a positively hostile, I should say, and raucous atmosphere at the weekend for the Northampton game, because the fans are going to be right. Yeah, we want to back Simmer. We don't want to lose him. We're desperate to keep him as long as we can. So I think you'll find, hopefully, that'll help drive the players through. I get what you mean. Yeah, I think we've still got enough to keep ourselves in. I mean, truth is, Blackpool are a team that should be challenging for a top 2 place. They've got the best striker in the division in Jordan Rhodes. We'd kill for a player half as good as him. So I kind of feel like we take that away. And the Reading game's a ridiculous one. I keep saying this, but stats wise, we matched up to them. I know the only stat that matters is the scoreline. We always say that, but stats wise, we had as many shots as them and many shots on target, more corners than them. Possession was pretty balanced. We just switched off to 3 or 4 times. And that's the worry, getting someone experienced in there maybe to tie things up. And I do wonder if they're one of those ones.
How's Lavelle been getting on, Lee?
He's been excellent up until those last couple of games. He wasn't that bad against, but he was actually all right against Blackpool. He had a bit of a stinker against Reading, and that's probably part of the problem. I think you could probably say of the 5 goals, 3 of them he was at fault on in some way, shape, or form. So obviously the own goal and then 2 of us. Whereas all the other games, he's generally been good, but I think we are missing Paul Huntington at the back a little bit there. And Barkley struggled a little bit in the last few games. He hasn't quite hit the standards he had last season. So, I mean, I almost wonder if Simmer would be better off bringing Corey Wheel in for a few games, because generally Corey never lets us down when he comes in. He was so solid and
reliable last season, wasn't he, Corey Whelan?
Oh, against Charlton when he came in for that game, he had a really good game, and he's one of those ones I said on our pod, like, you didn't really notice his performance, which is not a bad thing for a centre back. Really, you don't necessarily need to, because if you notice them, there's a chance that you might be noticing because they're making mistakes and players are getting past him easily. He was just solid and did his job. So I do wonder if you're bringing him in for a few games might help just a bit, steady the ship a little bit there. But yeah, the problem is as well, going for 4-3-3, we've lost a little bit what John Mellish offers going forward as well, in terms of being able to attack. He's played in midfield a couple of times and he's actually done all right there, and he's been quite busy, but he's actually looked very solid in a back 4. But I'd like to see us get back to that back three if we possibly can for a few
Yeah,
games.
it definitely
just to get them all out there.
more, doesn't it? Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, a lot of work ahead, I think, for Carlisle to get some of those players back fit and hopefully to strengthen in January. But great news about the Piatek family and what that means for the club's long-term future. Lee, thanks so much for talking to us and keep up the great work on Brunton Bugle.
Cheers.
Lee Rooney there talking from the excellent Carlisle United podcast, Brunton Bugle. I wanted to bring in our next guest, which is Joe from JH Scouting, who's a Bristol Rovers fan.
Goodness me, that is some lighting. Goodness me.
Appropriate lighting, some might say as well. Joe, good evening to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Just wondering how you're feeling about Matt Taylor's start as Rovers boss.
Hi, Gab, right? Hi, Ed.
Yeah. Hi. Have you? I don't know if you caught the last question or whether there's a bit of a.
Yeah, can you repeat it? My Wi-Fi is playing up like last time.
I get distracted by that lying as well. Don't worry about it.
And how are you feeling about Matt Taylor's start as Rovers boss?
Delighted, to be honest. No, the stream is a bit laggy. I'm just trying. What I'll do is I'll chat, and then if I hear you button, then I'll stop. So no, really happy. Nice to get someone in the door who's a normal bloke, to be honest. But just like, for example, like that first 10 seconds of his post-match interview versus Cheltenham, you could just tell he's very down to earth, very humble, honest, objective. I remember Joey never took responsibility for any defeats that we had. He'd always either blame the ref or shift the blame to the players in some extent. Taylor took a responsibility for a terrible first half. He made a few tweaks at half time, and then we saw a bit of a blueprint of what we might become accustomed to. Gab, if you've asked something, like I can't hear it, just type it in the chat, perhaps.
No, I haven't asked anything. Unfortunately, I think the technical side is really coming and going. I don't know whether any of our audience can hear it, but I'm not quite getting it myself. So I think we might have to give up on this one for now. But thanks so much, Joe. I know you do. For anyone wanting to know more about Joe's work, go over to JH Scouting _. Fantastic article, 2-part article on Matt Taylor, the new Bristol Rovers manager, detailing him as a manager and his ideas. But yeah, thanks for coming on, Joe. We really appreciate it. Unfortunately, technical issues have just got in the way, as sometimes can be the case. Ed, I want to ask you about a couple of the teams that we've Carlisle, first of all, we heard from Lee earlier. It feels like January is going to be absolutely huge for Carlisle, isn't it?
Has to be, doesn't it? Because I know Lee's made a good point about the injuries, which is a part, but I think what we're also really seeing is it's just not enough. They just haven't got enough at the moment. It's there to say. I think you certainly ruin not having Callum Guy in there and not having Paul Huntington in there, who are two your key figures in your promotion season, for instance. But even still, I was looking at the start of the season, looking at someone like Moxham, expecting him to be one of the absolute superstars at this level. I don't think he's really hit that level I kind of want him to have.
Apparently he's been playing with a bit of an injury, so that would
probably be a determining factor, certainly. But certainly at the moment, it's really hard to watch this situation for them. And what I saw coming out of the weekend, for instance, after their defeat to Blackpool, people going on the back of Simpson, I really find that struggle to wrap my head around that, especially because I was there at Wembley when they won promotion. I mean, this man for them is as iconic a manager as you could probably get at Carlisle.
I'm sure that's like a tiny minor.
I'm sure it is reactive and reactionary, and fans are emotional. I understand that, but even still, at the same time, it's a really difficult watch with Carlisle at the minute. Hard to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you I mean, on the one hand, I do want to sort of buy into this view that January, with the right investments and probably 7 or 8 signings, I think they'll be looking at with the right, because by the way, the Piatek family had expected to take over before the summer, so they've actually budgeted for effectively 2 transfer windows, so they're going to get that in 1 transfer window. That could be huge. At the same time, they have
the other thing to mention, Gab, does that require some offloading though? If we're looking at 2 windows worth of signings, you're going to end up with an incredibly bloated, unhappy squad if you're not able to upload those. And it's one thing getting them off your books; it's another thing getting to another club, because I think that's part of the offloading business for them. And I'm not entirely sure how many of those would be appealing to other clubs at the moment. Potentially some League Two sides, perhaps, but even still, depending on what you're offloading. I fear the situation where they focus a bit too much on what comes in rather than what comes out, and suddenly they've got a massive group, and the ones who start the season are suddenly going, well, where's my game time now? This isn't right in my eyes. I helped you get up into this league, so you suddenly turn your back on me.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, and probably summarises the challenges that Carlisle have got, and maybe some of those fringe players, your Corey Whelans, your Taylor Charters could be angling, could be getting League Two moves or possibly National League moves in January. Joe, I don't know if it's any better with this device.
No, I'm on my phone now, so I think all the issues have been sorted.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for
Was the phone calls and the lighting as well?
Yeah,
I missed the light. That was great.
Yeah, I turned the LEDs off in my room, and I put the old bulb on now. So I think.
Absolutely. What do you make of the Matt Taylor appointment, Joe? Just to kind of summarise what you wrote in that fantastic 2-part article on it.
Yeah, thanks, Gav. Did you catch what I said earlier or not?
Very little, unfortunately. It was very hit and miss.
No problem. Yeah, so it's just nice to have someone normal in the building, to be honest. I think, especially in hindsight, we've seen some of the tweets that Joey put out. I want to move on from it because we're in a new era now. But so to have someone in the building, and immediately after the Cheltenham game, obviously we drew 1-1. It was probably not the best result to start, but I'm someone who's going to give him patience. But even that interview after that game, within the first 10 seconds, he takes responsibility of that poor first half. What Joey never did was take responsibility of any results. He would either blame the ref, blame some sort of excuse on the pitch, or perhaps even shift the blame to the players. With Matt Taylor, I've already sort of seen signs of what we saw in the Darryl Clark in terms of how honest and humble he is, and objective of the situation and the players he's got. And it's just a breath of fresh air, and I think all Garcetti can get behind it.
Yes, certainly. Do you subscribe to the view, Joe, that this is possibly one of the best Bristol Rovers squads since maybe the late noughties?
Well, I mean, I've had a season ticket since 2013-14. I mean, I'm not sure about the noughties. I know that's sort of 2008, 2009. But in terms of since when I've been started watching them, 100%. I think the only team that I can really compare it to is probably the 16-17 season, where I remember we went to Chelsea and in the EFL Cup and only lost narrowly in that season, and we finished 8th, I think. Outside of that, without a doubt. But also we're playing some, we've been playing some great football, so it's not like we've almost got here in an ugly fashion. Joey left. To be fair to Joey, he left the club in a much better place than he picked it up in. We've had a new owner come in. It seems like ground's slowly getting there. Since Darryl Clark left, we've had a new training ground. So yeah, it's all pointing in a positive direction. If I'm honest, I think my expectations have actually changed this season because, when you're 2.5 years into a project with Joey, his ambition to get to the Championship, and so am I. When you're, 2 weeks into a Matt Taylor era, you've got. If we were to consolidate now and end up finishing 12th, then that's completely fine. He needs that time, and I'm sure he'll get that time.
Is there not that little bit of frustration though, Joe? Because it certainly, in my eyes, that group you have, particularly that front line, should be trying to top 6 in a season like this that is so open, presenting opportunities to not necessarily the big hitters, but certainly you guys, which I could probably call in the middle group of this League One lineup. And that was one of my big frustrations with Joey. It felt like he wasn't living up to that expectation I had in the team. And now with Matt Taylor in, who I do rate there as a coach, I think it's a fantastic appointment. I would understand if you guys also looked and said, right, I want to get back on track here and start pursuing the top 6 again, because it's far from out of reach at this stage, I would say.
Well, Matt Taylor's first interview, he said that there's more than enough games to compete for. I mean, I think we've got about 26 games. I think we've played 20, maybe played 19. So we've got 5-6 months of the season to go. And importantly, the transfer window's, a couple of weeks away. And we saw what happened on the 31st of August with that JCH deal. But I know it fell through, but it shows that we've got ambition there. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we're suddenly going to bring in 7 players. I think Taylor's pretty content with what he's got. He said one of the main reasons he came in was because of the squad.
I would be very happy with what you've got. I really, really like that group. I really do.
Yeah,
I completely agree with him.
You're completely right with the how I think the league's probably as least competitive as it's been for a few years, because we're in a rare situation where 2 of the 3 teams that come down had financial problems or points deduction.
Yeah.
I think Blackpool are slowly getting there now, but I'm not being convinced by them. We haven't actually played Blackpool yet, and we play them in a couple of games, so I'll get a good look at them at some point. The 4 teams that come up aren't doing terribly. I think I watched Orient and they were very, very good. But if you compare it to what we might get next season, if Stockport, Wrexham, Notts County, and then perhaps someone like Mansfield come up, you'd like to think that, in Notts County and Wrexham's case,
they're all ones that desire the championship certainly as quickly as they can. Absolutely. Yeah.
So suddenly you're going for a situation where you've got, perhaps in this season, you've got Portsmouth, Derby, Bolton, and then the rest is probably up. I mean, Stevenage doing a great job. Oxford, yeah, but they've even had a bit of a dip under. I'm not sure how they'll do under Buckingham, but yeah, you are right, Ed. It will be a bit of a missed opportunity, but I think the board. It's weird because we sat in in October, so if we got someone in the first week in November, it felt like we'd had loads of time. But suddenly
But then also to say, Matt Taylor was in the Rotherham job at that point, wasn't he? So he wouldn't have been available. So I would actually say maybe there's a bit of frustration, but this little bit of patience that's opened that gap to get him, I would actually say it's probably proved the right thing to do, and I would leave that down the line.
Oh, I'm delighted we've the patience has almost paid off, because I remember we had this conversation and some of the names being sort of going around the rumour mill were Steve Cottrell and that type. So I think we've come out of the other end of it in a good spot, and it's all to play for. I mean we're over 10 points off it now, so we're actually close to the relegation zone in the playoffs. But it's just about consistency. If you can get a few, even just a bit of an unbeaten run, like if you draw a couple games, you get a couple wins here and there. If we're going into the last 12 games of the season, we're within 5 points of the playoffs, and we've got more than a chance as everyone else has.
Absolutely. I want to ask you about what Bristol Rovers are going to need in January, Joe, because it seems to me that in Jack Hunt, Connor Taylor, possibly I'd put Grant Ward in that category. Certainly Luke Thomas and his relationship with Hunt, Brown and Chris Martin, there's a good core of players. So if you can make
Anthony Evans too. I love Anthony
Evans.
He's
Absolutely,
great.
yeah, for sure. If you can make the right remaining additions, and of course Aaron Collins can find his form from the first half of last season, you could be looking pretty strong.
I think we need I agree. I think we need a left winger. I think Scott Sinclair is impact a bit limited. I don't think he's a bad bench option, but in the season where
this left winger should be Collins, shouldn't it? In an ideal world, or is the idea he plays off the striker instead rather than to the left of him?
Yeah, no. Well, we had a lot of success last season with Collins because Collins is quite 2-footed. So there were so many situations where he can either come inside and have a shot, but he can even go on his left, and that's how we got so many assists through Collins and Coburn, because Collins could just cross it with his left. Yeah. He's not. We are in a situation where we don't have a Coburn, and Collins isn't firing on all cylinders. And also, I believe Harvey Vale's best position is probably on the right. So in that scenario, we've got 2 great left-footed inverted wingers in Thomas and Vale competing for one spot, ideally. And then you've got Sinclair, who's more than a capable sub option, but in games where Collins might have to play a bit centrally, there's a clear gap there. And because I don't want we haven't got a left back who's capable of having the same attacking threat as someone like Jack Hunt. I don't want George Friend being our main attacking outlet on the left hand side. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, hopefully Rovers can strengthen that left side and maybe try and make the remainder of the season interesting under Matt Taylor, but certainly some excellent foundations there. Joe, thanks so much for your time. I'd like to thank my co-host Ed Walker as well for his fantastic insight on League One. We'll finish with a little segment with Knappers from Fleetwood Town, but thanks. Yeah, thanks for all you to all my guests. Thanks to you for listening at home.
Have a good evening.
We'll see you again next week.
Yes.
So I'm joined by Knappers from Cod's Vlogs and the League One podcast. How are you, Knappers?
Very good, Gab. Less said about my football team, the better. But no, great to join you and dive in.
Well, less said the better. That's ironic, seeing as you're on a podcast to talk about your football team. I did actually watch the extended highlights of the Stevenage game, and I was actually quite impressed with some of the build-up play. But clearly, it's been a mixed bag in terms of performances, and obviously the results haven't been acceptable.
Yeah, Gab. It's one of those where obviously you made a really good point on that, on the T-Lot post before, but it's one of those where it's frustrating, and it's a bit like last season where stats aren't quite showing what Fleetwood are playing like, and you have to kind of be there to see how bad the performances have been. Now, for me, you can say what we've lost 3 in a row in League One, 3-0. For me, I'm counting the Cambridge game because it's an FA Cup game. The Bristol Street Moat was less said the better, really. Derby full strength team, let's be honest about it, bar 1 or 2. But it has been a mixed bag. The Oxford game that we lost under Johnson, we played awful. In the Wickham game, they had 12 shots on target at our ground. It was like, how's that happening? And then, you look at the most recent 5 as well. You look at the Lincoln game, we were pouring, but we had more shots. And really, I don't think the goalkeeper, Jensen made any good saves, to be fair. And it's been a frustrating one because we've been really flat, giving away chances, not fighting, and not doing what Fleetwood Town need to be doing in Scarborough League One.
I've got some anecdotal evidence to suggest that the fitness wasn't really worked on as much as it should have been in the summer, and that's been an issue that was part of the poor start you had under Scott Brown. And I do wonder if the poor preparation is kind of carrying on a little bit. So there's inevitably going to be a conversation about the manager these days, when it's this sort of run of results. And I do understand that Lee Johnson has to take some accountability for that. But I also feel like there's a build-up of problems that probably predate him a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. I watched a couple of training sessions of Fleetwood quite early on in pre-season, probably about 4 weeks before the season started over in Waterford. And there was a lot of fitness work being done. The players looked knackered then, but let's be honest, what players aren't knackered in pre-season? You've just come back, and they did a lot of running in that kind of first 2 or 3 week period. They had the balls out quite early. I'm quite old school that you don't get balls out on day one. And it's very non-league based, but I think you do your fitness work and the balls come out gradually. Yeah, I could see that 100%. We were getting outrun, we're getting outfought, and we brought a lot of players in the summer that I don't think were quite match ready as well. I think that's a good point. Like Boston hadn't really played much football. Andy Montgomery hadn't played much football. Danny Mayer is a good player, but can you play Danny Mayer 3 times a week for 90 minutes? I don't think you can.
No.
And then, you got your Jack Marriott that came back in not great shape, if I'm honest with you. Jaden Stockley has had back issues as well. So it was kind of recurring injuries from last season as well, Gab. So I think that's been a big problem for us. Since Johnson's come in, the fitness levels have improved, but I kind of think because the way he's working them in training, if I said going into the Blackpool game, I could see us being a bit fatigued, and a few injuries, and the players look knackered. I kind of see a bit of tiredness and lethargicness, and when you lose him, I just wonder, is he training them like, fans over to say, they need to go on the training ground tomorrow. Sometimes I don't think that's the best thing. And I said this week, I hope the players have had a Christmas party. And, I hope they just had a couple of days off away from football, because sometimes when you're in a losing run, the worst thing you can do is train. Just have a break. kind of just take 2-3 days, take stock, go away for a few days, and come back Tuesday, come back Wednesday with a new focus. Forget the last 5 games. Think Saturday's a chance to kind of rebuild your season. Because if you win Saturday, we're only 4 points worse off, as of Saturday. If we win Saturday. So it's like, well, we're at home. There's an opportunity there. Look, Peterborough are a good side, and it's going to be a hell of a game.
Blimey. I didn't even know you had Peterborough, mate.
Just a small matter of Peterborough. And guess what after that? Small matter of Portsmouth. But I've also said just quickly as well, they're probably the best 2 games we could have because there's no pressure. They're good sides. They'll come at us. They'll open up. And if Fleetwood lose 1-0, so what? You've lost to a good side. If we get something, brilliant.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons, Knappers, why I had Fleetwood going down before the start of the season was because I was quite conscious. I was quite conscious of, I suppose, the impact that the situation with Andy Pilley would sort of have, not necessarily on the practical day-to-day side of things, but just on the club from a sort of mental point of view. Do you think that seeped in a little bit?
Over the summer, and I always do my predictions, but don't look at other people's predictions before I make mine.
Very good.
I remember putting mine out, and I had a Fleetwood about 16th, 17th, and I got slaughtered for it. Honestly, written by Fleetwood fans, like, why have you put us so low down? And I went, and I said the exact same thing about you, as you about Andy Pilley.
Sure. Yeah.
And I remember when you put that post, a lot of Fleetwood fans are outraged, and I just kind of put the eye emoji, basically saying that I agree here. But I think the player squad's better. I don't think it's the playing squad that are bothered about Andy Pilley. Because for me, you go into a job, your manager, say your area manager or something like that. I don't care if that changes for me. As long as I get paid, I'm not bothered. I don't think it's that. I think it's off the pitch, like you say. The club aren't sure who's going to run it, where the finances are going to come from in the next few weeks. Like the financial state is okay, to be fair, but we don't kind of have a stability in place. Everyone's everywhere, kind of everyone's filling in there, and there's not kind of that one person in place. It's like, Fleetwood at the moment are like a classroom with no teacher. That's how it just turns into absolute chaos. It really does. And that stability access, I think we're missing. I didn't think we'd struggle this much, if I'm honest with you. But, we are missing that kind of, we've had Andy Pilley for, 20 years. And when you get used to someone for so long and kind of leave, it is going to take adjusting to. And, Carlisle, Charlton, I've had new owners, in recent months as well. That will take adjusting to get used to get their kind of, players, staffing that they want. But for Fleetwood, it's kind of, we never expected it really until about 12 months ago.
Absolutely, yeah, and I do think that's I do suspect that's come as the news has come as a bit of a knock for supporters because look, he's a club legend in so many ways because of what he's done for the club. So I do get that. I also wanted to ask you about January then, Knappers. What do you think Fleetwood are going to need in January to give yourselves a chance of staying up?
I honestly think, Gabby, it'll be the biggest January this football club will have had since they've been in League One. Bear in mind as well, now, I lost a bit of January last year due to obviously illnesses and didn't go, and kind of, I don't really remember it very well, bringing players in. I remember, we brought Robertson in, we brought Marriott and Stockley in. Now, Fleetwood, at one point in the season, Accrington went 1-0 up away at Port Vale, and I remember seeing Fleetwood in the bottom 4. And it kind of felt like Fleetwood were never there because how well they finished in the table. Fleetwood was struggling until January. Wasn't as bad as this, but they weren't winning, but they weren't losing. And if they lost, they were losing 1-0. So it didn't go under the radar. Now they're losing 2, 3s and 4s. It's starting to get noticed a little bit. Now, under Scott Brown, we only lost by more than 2 goals 3 times. That was Portsmouth last season, Wickham away last season, and Bolton away. Now, let's be honest, they're 3 tough teams to play against.
Sure.
And this season, we are losing a few. So I do think, if I'm honest with you, I think we'll see players leave the football club. I think we'll see Robertson, Rooney. I think Shimanga will go back to Posh. I think Monty will go back, Montgomery to Celtic. I think Boston could potentially go back. I could see Jack Marriott leave the football club. I could see a couple of others leave. Maybe a Brendan Wiredu, maybe a Josh Earl. He's got 6 months left on his contract. If you want to be self-sustainable, those types of players might have to move on. But then coming in if I'm honest with you, if I had to be, I think we need a new goalkeeper. I think we need a left back. I think we need a right back.
Hang on, Jay Lynch was he player of the year last season?
Now, on Jay Lynch is a decent goalkeeper. He is. But the issue is, I thought he was not average last season. He was a 6 or 7 out of 10, and he got a little bit hyped up more than he maybe should.
Derby away, those kind of performances.
Yeah, he was a good goalkeeper. There's nothing getting wrong. Yeah. But this season, he's been a little bit poor. And I don't know what it is. Is it second season syndrome for him? Because last season he was decent. You've got to give it him.
Yeah, he's not had a career history. That's the thing. That's, where I was kind of a little bit.
Good at File, to be fair to him. But I do worry about his height a little bit. And I think sometimes he struggles commanding a box a little bit. Kenzie was similar height, but he commanded a box. And would it be good if Jalen stayed in goal? I don't think he's the weakest point in our team. He is in other people's fans. I think that's harsh. But I think that if you're being critical this season when you're changing and putting a 19-year-old goalkeeper in for a couple of games in the cup, I think that if Matt Mullen did well in those cup games, he might have been staying in. And to be fair, Lynch made a couple of good saves Saturday. But we need a new left back. The full-backs in our team are the weakest point in our team. Josh Hill's not a left back, as we both know. Sean Rooney has struggled this season, but he also was one of the better players last season going forward. The issue
I thought actually against Stevenage, and I'm going back to that Stevenage game, I thought he linked up quite nicely with the chap ahead of him.
He did, but the issue is he's one of Scott Brown's boys, and I think there's been a kick-off there. Johnson hinted in
that sounds like a new BBC series.
Scott I know, Mrs. Brown's boys, there we are. Never realised that. But there's been a kick-off there because he signed for Scott. Would he have signed for Fleetwood if Scott Brown was it? No, he's a Celtic fan.
Sure.
Scott Brown, if you look at it, they signed him. Bosson, Monty, Scott Robertson, Rooney. They're all Celtic fans, all from Celtic. They're all idolise him. They want to play from the fort up from him. And he was that vicious character that you need in your team. We're missing that a little bit this season. And Rooney didn't look right from the let-go, even when Scott Brown was in the charge. So I think we need a right back. That's two or three.
Yeah.
I think we need another midfielder because I think that if you can play Brendan, you can play Danny Mayer. I think Broom is a good player as well, but we need another one in there.
Rudiger's better in midfield, do you think, than at centre half?
Say again. Yeah, I think centre half, if Ben Hennigan can be back fit for January, we're okay, because then you can, all of a sudden, then Brendan can play in there.
He's a good League One centre back, isn't he, Ben Hennigan?
Oh, he's a bit on the slow side, but he's just come back from a 9-month ACL injury, and he's the biggest leader in the dressing room from everything that I've heard at the football club. Like, he's the one, in my opinion, I like Josh Vella. I think he's a player that you need. And I kind of think sometimes he'd do better if he wasn't captain, if I'm honest with you. I think he's got that on his shoulder. Yeah. And he has got a tendency to get booked. But Ben Hennigan, I think, would be suited to the captain a little bit more. And or even, if you wanted to go a little bit younger, Carl Johnston, but he doesn't play enough. So I think we need another midfield in there. We need a couple of wingers, in my opinion, because Junior is out for, I think, another 3 or 4 weeks. And you can't rely on young players week in, week out. Promise is injury prone. He's 92, 93 kilo, Promise, and he struggles with it with a couple of injuries since he's been at the club. And we need another striker, because I don't think Stockley's going to be fit enough. I don't think Marriott will stay. So I think we need 7 or 8. And the way Johnson's talking, it'd be stupid if Fleetwood sacked him, because what's the point in all these recruitment meetings?
You want someone who knows the problems going into January, as opposed to someone who's coming in who just doesn't have a clue. Because you can watch the games, the 90 minutes, but then it's another thing to actually be in and around the dressing room and smell things out and be able to know what the problems are. And look, I know, I'm sure Lee Johnson is not without his faults, but this is someone who's managed consistently in the Championship.
Yeah.
So I think. I think you've got to back him, and hopefully he can turn things around with throughout January.
Yeah, 100%. And I think Johnson, the only critique I'd have, I think he's had a few chats about you're not going to be playing, you're not going to be going in here in January, and a little bit ruthless. Kind of think, well, hang on, you're having these chats maybe 3 or 4 weeks too early, and all of a sudden then players kick off. And I kind of think half the staff, I kind of thought there was a split when Brown got sacked. Half didn't want him to get sacked. Your Jay Lynch's, your Rooneys, your Montgomerys, your Boston Lowells, your Josh Vellas, the types of players that Brown brought in. All of a sudden, someone else comes in, because Brown did well last season overall, in terms of results, and some big results in the FA Cup, and against Derby away, and we were tight in games, and proper Fleetwood side battling, don't give up. And then half of them wanted Brown to go because they didn't get opportunities and they didn't really like him. And it's the same with the fans, really. So I kind of think Johnson's kind of had that split and he's trying to move the bad eggs on. But yeah, it's not good at the moment. The body language, by the way, Gabby, is awful. Like, I watched them walk in the other day and there's a video, I don't know if you saw it, when they're walking in at Derby. It's not good. They look deflate. And that's why I said, have a Christmas party. Have a few days off because, look, they'll be outraged. Some of the players are out on Saturday night. People are moaning about why. Because what's the point of living like a prisoner when you're losing games of football? Just relax. And that is where the man management comes in. Like, your John Sheridan, as you've done it, days off, away from it. Just don't think about football for 3 or 4 days. And all of a sudden then, because if you keep going in, to work every day, not feeling happy, you don't have a break and you're working constantly 7 days, it's not going to end. And in the end, you'll just burn out. And that's what I think's happened with Fleetwood this season.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes with the fixture scheduling, it's not always possible to do that. But yeah, absolutely. I think January is a crucial month ahead. Listen, Knappers, it's been great to get your insight. Keep up the great work with Cods Vlogs and T-Lock, and hopefully catch up with you later in the season, pal.
Cheers, Gab. Thank you, mate.